Segment 3, civilizational exhaustion. Again, America alone. Quote, a suicide bomber may be a weak weapon, but not against a weak culture. Explain that.
Yeah, essentially, Islam has bet that we have expensive toys. We've got the best kind of aircraft carriers. We've got the best kind of tanks. We've got the smart bombs. And that's a short-term advantage. If you want to pick a fight on a battlefield, if you want to pick a fight that is slightly more ambiguous, that never actually calls out the force you're up against onto the battlefield for a big tank battle, then what matters is will. What matters is will. And they have bet that the West does not have the will to defend itself. And they see that every day of the week. For example, in the way Comedy Central just a couple of days ago caved in and censored the show South Park. I don't really know much about South Park. I don't watch it particularly. I don't have a TV reception worth speaking of. But one thing I do know is that 10 years ago, South Park was able to do a Muhammad joke, and it went on the air, and it was broadcast, and nobody threatened to kill anybody over it. Right. What has happened since then is that we have taught these people the lesson that if you threaten to kill and you threaten to murder and you threaten to intimidate, you don't actually have to kill or murder anyone. The culture will just cave anyway.
All right. You identify a couple of sources of this civilizational exhaustion. Let me try to ask you for an explanation of each. Again, I'm quoting from America Alone. Most mainline Protestant churches are to one degree or another post-Christian. They hold, actually I'm quoting this sentence just because I love the sentence. Deep breath. They hold that if Jesus were alive today, he'd most likely be a gay Anglican bishop in a committed relationship, driving around in an environmentally friendly car with an arms are for hugging sticker. Close quote. The West is exhausted because it has ceased to believe.
Well, I think it has ceased to believe in anything. And by that I mean it's not necessary for everyone in a Western nation to be a believing and observant Christian. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand, I think, that your civilization springs from a relatively narrow foundational source. I find it, I like atheists, but I must say I find the quality of atheism has deteriorated dramatically over the last century. If you go back to the late 19th century when Nietzsche declared that God is dead, he at least respected God enough to want to pick a fight over his existence or not. That's something slightly more sophisticated than if you look at Richard Dawkins or, for example, Christopher Hitchens, a smart guy, a man I like very much, yes. A man who is on the right side of most things. But Christopher Hitchens says religion poisons everything. I don't understand how you can look at most of the great artwork of Western civilization. I don't understand how you can listen to Mozart or Brahms and say that. It's not necessary to be an observant Christian to hear the beauty in a great European requiem mass that springs from that Christian tradition. And so the idea of trashing our civilization in the interests of, I think, a multicultural nullity, I think has been a disaster. And I think it's left a great big hole where our identity ought to be.
Second cause of civilizational exhaustion, you argue, and I quote again from America Alone, quote, the populations of wealthy democratic societies expect to have total choice over their satellite TV packages, yet think it perfectly normal to allow the state to make all the choices in respect of their health care. The torpor of the West derives in part from the annexation by government of most of the core functions of adulthood. Close quote. Explain that one.
Well, I don't think it's very difficult. I think if you take a picture of the average 13-year-old in California today, and then you take a picture of a 13-year-old from, say, my part of New Hampshire, circa 1878, just put those photographs side by side. Which one would you be willing to leave your house to if you had to go away for a weekend? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a very difficult question to answer that. Now that's fine when you're 13, but what happens when you extend adolescence, The President of the United States has just told us that if you're 26 years old, you can stay on your parents' health insurance plan. So he's basically said at 26, you're still a child.
Childhood extends to 26. Right?
On your 27th birthday, you've got to finally shape up and move out of your parents' insurance agency. But until then, you're a child. The problem with that is that I think we have essentially created a society of permanent adolescence, where the important business, healthcare, why is it that people could make their own healthcare arrangements 50, 100, 200 years ago, but that now the state has to do it for us? And what does that say about us? When you insulate people when you insulate your citizens from all the most basic pressures of life, what kind of citizenry do you wind up with? And that's why I do think we are creating essentially a society of permanent adolescence, where we talk about our iPods, we talk about the music we listen to, we talk about our cable packages, whereas everything important, the decisions are made for us by the government.